All right, hey guys, Dr. Sean here. We're going to do I hope, a fun little class for us today. It's going to be what I call my Sunday school version. I'm trying to figure out where's that happy medium for showing you guys information, bringing things forthward to you so you can see this stuff and really, what do we want to hear? What do we want to know? So we're going to start out today's post by simply going through that this is for people who are free thinkers, who are openly questioning things going on in life right now. If you're not that person, now's the time to stop. All right? If you find yourself someone who questions things, who's thinking a little bit, who's just not sure, when you look at stuff, it's just not adding up, and it surely can't all be conspiracy, right? When you start being that person, then this is the right post for you today. If you're anybody else, you can stop now before you go any further. I don't have to waste your time, which is awesome. Now, for the rest of you that are going to join me, and I'm guessing there's going to be a lot of you because I had 200,000 of you join me on our last one, I would like you to share what we're about to share. I'm not going to ask for donations and information. I'm not going to give you phone numbers and all this stuff. It's just information. It's to make you question things. It's to make you ask, why? What's going on? That's the purpose of this video today. I'm going to talk about why we're seeing it more and more in children lately, and what are they looking for. But I'm going to go back a little bit and just kind of get an idea of what's going on here and why it's happening. So I wrote out a little outline here because there's so many things to grab at out there. It's like, what's true? What's not? I hear this. I see 3 things that refute it. And then I hear, oh, this came out of the CDC, but the World Health Organization goes against it. And then you have the National Institute for Health saying one thing, you got Fauci saying another, Dr. Brick saying one thing, and you've got another doctor saying another. And it's like, well, how do you know what to do? Because none of you are physicians. So we have to go through this and say, well, how do we help you? So I'm going to bring my experience into this. Now, right, I do natural healing. It's what I do. I got a background in chiropractic, acupuncture, herbology, traditional Irish indigenous medicine. God, what else is out there? My great-grandfather was into healthcare. My grandfather was in chiropractic. His brother was a medical doctor, ran a hospital in Sturgeon Bay. I don't know, both my uncles were physicians. I've got naturopathic care in my family. I've got mainstream medicine in my family. I was fortunate enough that I got the option to go to medical school or something different, right? So using that background, and that I see roughly 10 to 15,000 patients a year and have for the past 2 decades, I have a lot of clinical experience, hands-on experience. I don't do back pain, neck pain, and headaches. I see chronic degenerative disease. That's what walks through my door. I look at things that other doctors fail at. So I thought, this is a good one to talk about. So let's go through this now. I've got my free thinkers on there, and good morning to all of you. I love seeing what you're all doing here. Listen to epidemiologists. Yeah, they're great people, right? Especially if they put their hands on people and try to help. Makes them even better. But even they aren't sure on this right now. Some of them are saying, oh my God, the sky is falling. Other ones are saying, nah. So who do you believe? Who do you go with? I've seen both sides of the fence. So I'm going to give you my 2 cents on how this goes. And I want to start with, where have we been? We're going to go just a quick recap, right? We started out with a lockdown in March in the United States. Now, a lot of you are coming in from around the world, and good morning to you in the afternoon, wherever you're being. I guess it should be evening where you're at right now. So good evening. The lockdown started, and we immediately said, okay, distance, shelter, masks. Now we've gone through this, and a lot of studies have come out that says, okay, those are all great things to do in the short term, especially when something's acute. When something's acute, it's getting its legs, you really want to try to slow it down. And that was excellent. That was the idea, flatten the curve, right, that we all heard from everybody. But then once we flattened the curve, rules changed. Now it was no longer flattened curve. Now, well, we got to get a cure for it. Got to get rid of it. And that started bringing a lot of people out of the woodwork saying, wait a minute. We've never been successful with the coronavirus for curing it, ever. We've never had a cure that stops it from reflaring its head. We can't even stop measles, and we've been trying to vaccinate for it for 50 years. Yet it still periodically reflares its head. Now, we always poke fingers at each other and blame and blame and blame, but the reality of it is we don't have a fix for it entirely. Mother Nature tends to find a way. Mother Nature is very crafty, and it'll find a way around things. So we start with this basic. Now we move on. We started out with 2.2 million are going to die, and they reduced that to 700,000. They dropped it to 450, down to 200,000, and they went to 80,000. And then all of a sudden they decided, hey, let's just call everything that anybody has in their blood, if it's got COVID in there, no matter what they die from, that's what we're going to label it as. And there's lots of debate out there, right? People saying, well, that's not true, and that is true, and that's not true. You hear it all over the place. I can only go with what I know. I can only go with the patients that I see through my practice. I treat dozens of nurses, physicians, people that are in hospital staffs, ER techs. I see all of this stuff. And I've seen both sides. I've had patients that have gone in and personally been treated, diagnosed as COVID, coming out with 3 negative tests for it. I'm like, well, how did you get diagnosed if you had 3 negative tests? Well, they weren't sure and they thought it could be. Okay, I'm cool with that. I'm not, hey. I've also seen people that have gone in that probably had it and the test missed it. I'm okay with that too. But the key is you got to be open-minded. You got to keep that head open. So we move on then and we say, okay, so everything went from COVID. So we saw pneumonia deaths drop. We saw heart attacks, ironically, drop. We saw flu deaths, influenza drop. At the same time, this other guy's going up. So you got to think, well, was there a crossing in the stream somewhere? Or maybe some of these deaths got lumped onto this side by accident. We'll assume it was accident, right? We don't want to be conspiracy. So it's probably accidental, maybe a little bit both. Who knows, right? So as we go looking at this thing, we say, okay, what are we waiting for? We waited for the white knight. The white knight was going to be the vaccine. We're going to get this miracle vaccine that's going to come out and save humanity. The problem is we've never come up with a vaccine for a coronavirus, ever. And you look at that and you think, okay, well, what are other coronaviruses? How about the common cold? Common cold's been with us for eternity, and we've never found one for that. You don't think they'd be throwing one at you if they had it? Sure they would. So we look at this and we say, okay, well, we haven't fixed the common cold. How are we going to fix something that's more virulent, more aggressive, more deadly? How are we going to fix that? Well, we're going to do all this rapid studying, and we're going to do it in the same labs, in the same hospitals, in the same universities that do all the other studying. So I'm thinking, unless we're opening up schools to do more and more research, we're doing research in the same facilities that we're already doing research. So I look at that and I think, all right, so maybe we give them a little more funding so they can get more people doing research, more grad students getting in there, getting their hands on it. But there's only so many people. So the reality of it is, if you're a virologist and all you do is study viruses and vaccines, unless you put every other vaccine you're trying to make on the back burner and say, this is precedent, this is it, we're only doing this right now, and run that out there, you're not going to see this huge uptick, right? Because the research is already being done and has been for decades. So then we come back to this idea saying, okay, now the rumor mill. Take vitamin D, use quinine, use vitamin C, use Z-Packs, antibiotics, throw anti-inflammatories at it, but don't throw anti-inflammatories. Put steroids in there, but don't put steroids in there. God, don't take aspirin or NSAIDs because they make it all worse according to the studies that we saw early on. But were they studies or were they just rumors? Appear to be more rumors than studies, right? We saw China buying stuff up like crazy on the open market, but not telling anybody anything was going on. And we know this is for a fact for true. So we look at this and say, okay, if they were doing that, they knew they had a problem. They thought, let's quarantine or corner the market, get it all, and then we'll let the world know. Okay, so they'll deal with that later. So we come back to this idea, sunlight, ventilators. Is it a respiratory problem? Is it not a respiratory problem? I've seen great research out there right now over the last month that says, look, it looks a lot more like an embolism type problem, a blood problem versus a true respiratory issue. Now that doesn't fit the nature of most of the coronaviruses, but what about this has fit the nature of most of the coronaviruses, right? It seems almost like it's been tinkered or a little bit of a mutation in there somewhere where it doesn't fit the MO. Okay, cool. That gets us to where we are now. Where are we at now? Real statistics are starting to pile in. We're seeing more and more and more of this coming in every day. And thank God for this, right? We're noticing that our fatality rate has dropped like a lead balloon. It just went boom and down, right? Now, you still got people hanging on to statistics from 2 months ago, and that's okay. You can do that, but they're not correct. Those statistics are wrong. And we're seeing them come lower and lower and lower, and I thank God for the state of New York. They took the brunt of this in the United States, and their stats are really what we're all looking at right now. Because if you take New York out of the picture, if you pull them out completely, half of all deaths in the country are happening in nursing homes. Right? You throw another almost 30% on top of that are happening to people over the age of 70 with a pre-existing comorbid condition. That means 80% of everything or more of all this that's going on is happening in a very small, tiny percentage of the population if you pull New York out of it. All right, but we'll put New York in because they're part of us and we like them. So we're bringing New York back into the mix, and we're saying, okay, New York, since we're going to have you in the mix and you've got more cases than anybody, and you've done more testing than anybody, what are you saying right now? Well, they came out this last week and their governor said, hey, wow, holy crap, 14%, 13.9 was the number he used, almost 14% of our population has had it already. We're seeing late-stage antibodies. Now, what does that mean, guys? You make antibodies when something gets in you and infects you. And when that something gets in there and infects you, your body mounts a defense against it. and it leaves little markers behind to let you know that, hey, we already mounted a defense against that. So they're finding that 14% of the population that they're testing has had this already. That's huge, and it goes well beyond the numbers that are being reported for positive cases. Because remember, if you've already beaten it, you're not going to show up as having it when they do the standard tests on you, right? Because it's not there anymore. You already beat it. So when we're looking at this thing, okay, so the 300,000+ cases coming out of New York are probably more realistically sitting around almost 3 million cases. Now, what does that do to the fatality numbers? It just bottom falls out of it. And that is great freaking news, right? That is super awesome news. So for those of you that will hate on me later, I'm sure you will, it's okay. For those of you that are going to give me a hard time, guys, here's the deal. What's bad about that? What's bad about good news? We don't get a whole heck of a lot of it lately. Why not some good news? Why not, wow, this thing doesn't kill like we thought it did. Not even close to what we thought it did. I'm thrilled about that. It's super, super good because it means we can safely, and using our noodle, because remember, we're free thinkers in this group, we can safely move forward to kind of opening things back up. But then all of a sudden we hear, oh my God, Doc, we can't do that. If we open up, it's going to flare up again. We're all going to die again, right? Isn't that what we're told? Fauci mentioned that. CDC mentioned that. But the World Health Organization said that's not the case. They said, look at Sweden. They never shut down at all. They just put in some common sense. Keep a little distancing. Try to watch each other. Stay away from people who are super susceptible. And I get it, after the first month, I had no problem locking down during March. It sucked. I missed March Madness. I love it. But it's okay. But looking at these sort of things, we come back and we say to ourselves, okay, now wait a minute here. So if this is the case, and these other areas of the world lock down, their death rate is not catastrophically different than everywhere else. And so we look at that and say, all right, if it's not a huge difference, and I mean, I'll see people come out there, well, you know, they did have 9 more deaths in the state next to them. It's freaking 9, and 9 is too many. I understand that, but it's not 9,000. It's not 9 million. It's not 900,000. It's 9. Percentage-wise, it's infinitesimal, which means maybe we overreacted. Maybe we pulled the knee jerk too quick on this sort of thing. And I understand being safe and secure. So we move on and we say, well, look at Georgia. The state of Georgia, the United States. Look at the state of Florida, the United States. They both opened up. Georgia opened up back in the middle of April and said, look, man, we're not seeing this thing. We're going to open up in April. And they caught all kinds of hell for it. You're going to make the entire country, you know, at risk. Everybody that touches your state is going to be at risk. You're going to watch people die. Why would you do that to someone? Why would you ever subject someone to dying? But here we are now, a month almost later, and Georgia's sitting back going, look, we had another decrease in our percentages. We dropped 12% just the other day. It dropped 12% more in our cases being reported. And we look at that and say, so wait a minute now. So they're tracking it. They're looking for it. Their numbers are coming down, 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 and they're not doing all the other stuff. So we look at that and think, well, let's go to Florida, right? Because Florida, clearly, Florida has an older population across the board. People retire to Florida. They don't retire to North Dakota a whole lot, right? Sorry, North Dakota, I love you, but they don't. They go that way. They want to be warm, right? So we go to Florida and we say, okay, we've got an advanced elderly population, lots of community living centers, right? Semi-retirement type centers, lots of nursing homes and things of that nature. And Florida saw a 14% decrease this last week in their total number of cases when they opened up. So right away, I just question, think a little. Don't blindly follow what we're being told. Just question. Life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, and I like to think freely should be in there too. Use that stuff, right? So we go on through here. We've watched our fatality rate. We were told initially that, oh my gosh, it's somewhere between 3% and 6%. New York reported 7.4% fatality. Now they refigured that to 0.74% fatality, less than 1. Yay, once again, that's super awesome, right? Super exciting. So we move on. What we know now is who's at risk. We know the rate at which they get in trouble. We know if they have coexisting conditions, we've got to protect them and quarantine them off. But we also know that we've known for thousands of years, and everybody who's ever raised an animal a day in its life knows when you have a herd of animals, you take the sick one away from the herd, you let the herd run. Take the next sick one away from the herd, let the herd run. You don't quarantine each and every animal in the herd, because the minute you put them all back together, what happens? Numbers go back up again. because it still has to run through the herd. It's just Animal Husbandry 101. It's not rocket science. Every farmer on the face of the earth that's ever raised an animal of any kind could tell you this. I'll go with them. I like that. So that brings us to, what about the children? Now this is interesting now. Kawasaki's is the term you're probably hearing right now a lot. Kawasaki's is an inflammatory disorder. It inflames the arteries predominantly in the body, right? And that can cut off blood supply to tissues. It can cut off oxygen to tissues. It's a serious condition if left untreated. Now here's the good news. Medicine's a rock star treating this, right? They're really freaking good at it. They throw some anti-inflammatories in there, maybe a steroid or something of that nature, and it knocks itself out. So that's really exciting. But I knew this was coming, and if you go back on one of my former videos I did for you guys about 2 weeks ago, I told you, here's where we're going. Here's where we're going. I believe the momentum behind this thing is losing its steam. And because it's losing its steam, not from a viral standpoint, not from a health standpoint, I believe there are different groups and people who sometimes look at situations and say, hey, this is an opportunity. Let's take advantage of the opportunity. And they do. Did they create it? Probably not. I highly doubt it, right? But it's an opportunity. And so when an opportunity forms, we want to take advantage of that opportunity. How do you do that? You keep the thing going. Now it's losing its steam. Vaccine's not here yet. We don't have a great med for it that we know of yet. And we'll go through that in a second. But the idea is like, all right, but it's still kind of petered out. We're watching it drift away in states. All of a sudden, the state of Wisconsin Supreme Court stepped on their governor and went, look, you can't mandate this stuff month after month after month on a hunch. And so you saw all the other states that were putting up a lot of resistance saying, well, okay, we got to pull back, or our Supreme Court's going to do the same thing to us. Now, okay, let them think. I'm not politics, right? I don't get into all this stuff. I'm just sitting there saying this is what I see. So we look at this now, we come back to our children. And I brought this up because when I was watching this, I saw Governor Cuomo giving his address out in New York. And he was talking about how we're going to see this decrease. I'm surprised it's in the home. He was talking about how much of it's spreading through the home now versus out and about, which was good news in some ways, a surprise to him and others. But then he had to throw in the very end, but we had this 5-year-old little boy die. Now, I'm a parent. I have a child. I have a little boy. I think losing a child is probably the most horrific thing a parent could ever go through. So you don't ever want a parent to suffer from this. But I also believe using children to maintain a possible grip you may have on something or to maintain a direction something is progressing is wrong as well. So let's look at the facts. It wasn't 3 days and the state of Illinois, yay, jumped on the bandwagon and said, oh my God, yeah, we've got 12 cases of this in Chicago. Now I think they're up to 17. New York said, well, we've got 96 cases in the state of New York. But remember those numbers I gave you early on? When I was going through there, I said, hey, New York's got almost 3 million cases and 96 are in children. So take that out statistically. 0.00004, right? An infinitesimal fraction is one too many. Of course it is. One's too many to lose to children that die in trampoline injuries. Yet it's the #1 hospitalization for all children in this country. Who knew, right? Little things like that, sports, injury, stuff happens. And you want to protect kids, but you got to protect them with knowledge. And you got to protect them with understanding and questioning things. If your child becomes ill, what's the symptom they're going to see? They're renaming this thing now. It's PMIS, Pediatric Multi-System Inflammatory Syndrome. It's not Kawasaki. It looks exactly like it, but they're renaming it something different, probably for this purpose. All right, so let's look at that. A rash, high fever, 102, 103 is what we're seeing with this thing. Sometimes abdominal issues, sometimes eye redness and things like that. And it tends to show up 4 to 6 weeks after they've been exposed to someone that has it. A month, month and a half, that's awfully strange. This thing shows up a month or more after. Now, the good news is that when they apply anti-inflammatories to this, kids do okay if they understand it quick enough. they do pretty well. A lot of these children may have a pre-existing condition that occurs. Some will not that we know of. One child is too many, but we've got to be very, very cautious. When you see a trend in your media shifting away from, hey, the elderly are dying in nursing homes, to, oh my God, look at the children. Look at the children. Because I believe that'll be the next big push if they're going to keep everything going and keep us the way we are. Or the society's going to be like, you know what, we're done with this. We're going to take care of everybody. We're going to move forward. And I'm going to go on to our new normal here in a moment. Now, what are we waiting for with this? We're waiting for the vaccine, of course. And now that brought me back to one of the rumors. One of the rumors floating around there is, hey, Doc, have you seen, I hear this all the time in practice, Doc, have you seen people who got flu shots that have a higher incidence of developing COVID-19? Well, we're seeing some of that reported, aren't we? I mean, all of you, or if you're listening to this, you're all tracking stuff, you're watching, you're reading like I do. We're seeing this reported. So the question becomes, why? And this is, I think, you're going to find interesting. The why falls in a very unique umbrella. It took me a while to put this talk together for you guys today because I had to grab from 9 different things that are out there to put into one presentation for you to try and sew all this together. This is the best thing I could find. It was a 2012 study that came out, and I got to remember who did the study now. I think it was National Institute for Health. They were looking at flu shots in children in Africa, of all places. So they're looking at flu shots in children. They were wondering, does it really help these children to avoid the flu? And they found that it pretty much was It didn't do a whole lot across the board. There wasn't this big, like, oh my God, you get your shot and hey, you're 90% less likely to get the flu. It was pretty much a stalemate. But what they did notice, and this is key to what we're talking about today, what they did notice is that when these children received their flu shot, their chance of developing another upper respiratory infection went up 400%. 4 times more, almost 5. Now think about that for a second. So you're telling me I get my flu shot to prevent the flu, but it weakens my immune system so much that it opens the door for some other thing to come creeping in there. So now I started thinking, well, if that's the case in children, what about adults? Right? They're all talking about, hey, these flu shots and this, that, and this is what they do. And I think to myself, maybe this is why. I don't know for sure. I'm just giving you something to kind of rattle around in that noodle and think about. Maybe this is why. If we see that it lowers immune response in children for other upper respiratory infections, and all of a sudden here comes a coronavirus, which ironically currently is labeled as an upper respiratory infection, wouldn't it be one of those others? And then you start thinking to yourself, well, who gets all the flu shots in the United States, right? Who's getting them all? Elderly? People in nursing homes? I don't know. If that were the case, then you'd see this huge surge in theory in nursing home patients having COVID-19. Food for thought, right? Something to think about. So as we look at these sort of things, we think, okay, what's the next piece here? Remember the numbers I showed you. When it's in children, they said it is rare. Rare. Extremely rare. And that is a huge, huge piece here. 1 too many. I understand that. But it's extremely rare. So you cannot allow them then to use this as a manipulative tool to get everyone to kind of say, well, let's keep all closed down and shelter up because it's something that is rare. Now, obviously, the person that it affects, they're going to be all over the media, right? You're going to see anyone that it affects out there, out there, out there, out there, because they have to tout the one they have, or the 2, or the 3. But they don't do that when flu season rolls around. Well, I guess they kind of do, don't they? They tell you, oh my God, we lost so many children died last year of the flu. Average flu season in the United States. This year we lost 62,000 according to the CDC so far. So, and that's all, who knows, right? Anymore, who knows what to believe. But 62,000 people died from the flu this year. So we look at that and say, well, how many of those were kids? How many of those were kids? Less than 100 for sure. Less than 100. And probably going to end up being in the 40s or 50s. So you look at that and you start thinking to yourself, wow, so the 62,000 who died from the flu, how many were over the age of 70 up with coexisting conditions? I'm betting it's going to mirror this almost exactly. Very similar, same group of people. Immune systems are weak. They're not nearly as hardy and strong as they once were. It makes sense. That group of people get in trouble easier. All right, doesn't mean you don't take care of them. It doesn't mean you don't have some kind of humanity to you. But we focused all of our attention on the white knight vaccine to come out of here, and then we said, oh, well, we're going to have this drug that's going to help us over here. But the reality of it is, now we're looking at it saying, wait a minute. Things like vitamin D help. And ironically, in children of all things, Kawasaki's disease, the only study that's been done to point, and it was just completed, found that in children who suffer from Kawasaki's, which mimics PMIS that they're putting out here now, they have a severe vitamin D shortage. Who knew? An inflammatory condition in the human body, in a child's body, suffers when it lacks the raw materials that it needs to rebuild and repair and function a healthy nervous system. Food for thought, right? So let's tie it all together. So the new study is showing us that the inflammatory markers that show up, okay, this is excellent research that was done here. There's inflammatory markers that you see in the human body now. They're looking at blood. It shows up 10 days prior to symptoms. What are the inflammatory markers? It's an enzyme that they're looking for. It's a C-reactive protein that they're looking for. It's a lymphocyte that they're looking for. When those three things show up in elevated numbers, all of a sudden we know, uh-oh, something's coming. Wouldn't that be cool to be able to treat somebody then according to that before it starts? Wouldn't that be outstanding to be able to have that kind of an angle on this thing? They also found that this study, this particular one, was 90% accurate. Hell, their tests aren't anywhere near 90% accurate. So to have a therapy that potentially could offer you some benefit, that's pretty cool. Now that's a good thing that's come out of a bad thing. We wouldn't have even looked for this had we not had all this stuff going on, right? So that's a good thing. What have we learned about masks during our pandemic? Right? We've learned that, hey, if you want to wear them, wear them. I'm all for it. If you don't want to wear them, that's your choice too, and I'm not here to judge you. Because me judging you makes me feel like, hey, I'm in a better position than you are. And guess what, guys? None of us are. Right? I know more about healthcare than the majority of people I'll speak to in my career. But I know diddly squat about rebuilding an engine or, well, I can sew a little bit. My wife makes fun of me for that. Doing something else. I don't know a lot of these things. I'm not building a house. I'm not digging a pool. I'm not laying concrete steps and pads and this and that. Everyone has different gifts, right? Try to use the people around you that have those gifts to get yourself knowledgeable. Now, the new study that confirmed the vitamin D in children, that's a big deal because it says, well, gosh, get your kids out and let them play. You get a sunny day outside, get their little butt out that door. Let them get that sunshine because that may very well help them stave off something that you're not even going to be aware of is there for 6 weeks. If you have a problem, get them into a doctor. Call them. I have no problem with that. You notice symptoms in your child, that rash, that high fever, things like that. Call your doctor. Say, hey, doc, I got a problem going on. Now, here's the interesting thing. What are they going to give you for it? Anti-inflammatory? Now they're going to use? And they're telling you there's an inflammatory marker here that we just found in the blood. And we learned early on that PMIS is an inflammatory condition. Kawasaki's is an inflammatory condition. And anti-inflammatories, quinine, antibacterial, anti-malarial type things, all of a sudden you're seeing this advantage to these things. And we look at this and say, so wait a minute here. We were told early on, avoid all the anti-inflammatories because it can make this all worse. But now we're learning, wait a minute. Everything we're seeing here in the last month says inflammation, 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 inflammation. Then get rid of the damn inflammation. That's how it works. Support normal body function. This brings me to my conclusion for today. Unicef. We're all familiar with Unicef, right? I walked for them a zillion times when I was a kid. I would trick or treat for Unicef. I would do all kinds of stuff for Unicef, right? They're supposedly this wonderful charity that helps out children around the globe. I'll go with that. Their medical director came out and said, we're going to see a catastrophe in childhood death if we do not get this thing under control. Not from COVID. That's the sad part. By locking down the way we have, by doing everything we have, this knee-jerk rapid reaction globally, they're predicting 1.2 million child deaths in the next 6 months because of lack of health care and food. Because these smaller nations looked at us and bigger nations around the world and they said, well, if it's working there, we got to pull back. But they don't have the science. They don't have someone like me sitting here right now trying to share stuff with you. They don't have that. So they lock down in less of a living condition than what we have. Lots of families, one small space, poor health, social, sanitization conditions, poor water, poor food, overcrowding, and all of a sudden they're predicting 1.2 million childhood deaths. New York said we got 96 kids that are ill, and we lost one. Now they've lost 3, I think. Chicago said we got 17. We got to lock down harder. But Unicef is telling us, look, if you keep this up and you don't recognize the science that's sitting in front of your face, you're going to be responsible for 1.2 million childhood deaths in the next 6 months. I'm not going to be. Last part of it here. The new normal. The new normal. Life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness. Which one are you willing to give up? Think about it. Which one do you want to be done with? You willing to give up your liberty? Your freedom? You're willing to give up your life? Because that's what's happening, right? That's what we're told. There's a new normal. There's a new normal we have to accept. Why? Why? You don't believe that viruses and bacteria and funguses have not been on this planet since the dawn of time? You don't believe that we haven't learned to adapt to these things over and over and over repeatedly for tens of millions, if not hundreds of thousands of years? Common sense alone would tell you the only reason we're here today is because our ancestors adapted. Somewhere along the way, they adapted. Because guess what? There wasn't a CDC, there wasn't a World Health Organization, there wasn't some inoculation to save everybody for the past million years. Those are all new. Those are all things that have come out in really the last 100 years, give or take. So you look at that and say, well, then how did we survive till now? How did we make it? And that's why I got the big laugh out of all this. The thing that's worked the best, that's hands down worked the best so far, they tell you social distancing, hygiene, and sanitation has worked the best. That's the exact same thing we did in 1918. So in 102 years, that's what we've learned. We've revolutionized modern medicine, changed it all. And in 102 years, we went back to what worked then. And they didn't have social media to let everyone know what was going on. They didn't have anything, right? They were little pockets. Hell, they didn't have radio for most people, let alone televisions and cell phones and all the communication. They didn't have any of that. And yet, we're all here. And I would bet, if I had to, that all of us and all of you that are watching this, that are going to share the living crap out of this when we're done, all of you that are doing this, right? I would bet all of you are sitting there going, okay, wait a minute. Well, my grandparents and mom and dad, and they came from that generation. Didn't they? How did we get here if they didn't? Which means they survived it too. Doesn't mean there wasn't loss and there wasn't hardship and struggle. That happens, right? And we do the best we can to educate ourselves. And I think that their knee-jerk reaction early was for that purpose. But now it's time to open your damn eyes and look a little bit and say, okay, wait a minute. This doesn't make sense any longer. Now we have to look at other states that didn't close down at all, other states that chose to close down a little bit, open back up early, and see that they're not seeing this rapid uptick. Look at the entire country, like Sweden, not seeing this rapid uptick. It's just kind of sitting there. And say, you know what? I'm not willing to accept a new normal. And when they sit there and say, look, coronavirus and COVID is the new normal for us. It may be here forever. But guess what? You have a new flu every season too. A brand new one every season. Which is why the flu shot misses. Big swing and a miss every season. All right? I'm okay with that. I'm okay with my healthy immune system being able to tackle and handle something. That's what it's about. It's not this catastrophic end of the world. I'm Dr. Sean McCaffrey. I'm the Robin Hood of Healthcare. I hope you guys have enjoyed this. Thank you for joining me this Sunday. Bye-bye.